In this video, we'll demonstrate how the critical view historically fails the four-empire test. Reminder to hit the subscribe button below and turn on the notification bell to stay up to date on our Daniel series as new videos come out. Critics of early authorship, and really that of predictive prophecy, have to address historically the four empires that come from Daniel 2 and then again in chapter 7. Their objection is sometimes called the Greek four-empire scheme. As we noted in chapter 2, the four empires are best represented by the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, and finally the Roman Empire as our four. Critics can't allow, though, for the fourth empire to be Rome, or really anyone else for that matter, because that would concede that Daniel, or these anonymous authors in their view, would be still casting prophecies about a fourth future empire in the book. The two views are mutually exclusive of one another in all regards. Simply put, the critical view can only allow for a retelling of the historical events and that they were only casted as prophecies in their point of view. So, they can't and won't allow for any accurate predictions to be casted past 160 BC after the conclusion of the Maccabean revolt. When you start digging into the critical view of Daniel, you realize that they are trying to slice it and dice it every which way possible, and that you really didn't have to go very far to see how much Daniel really is attacked. If you go on to Patheos, you will see a hosted article called Liars for Jesus. Does Daniel predict the future? And I'm sure you could assume that the author is really objective here with a title like that. But the main one that I would suggest looking up is from the secular web post of Chris Sandoval's The Failure of Daniel's Prophecies. This article puts together perfectly how critics come after Daniel. The main difference between these two views is how each view accounts for Media and Persia. The traditional view would say that Media and Persia formed a united empire, whereupon they conquered the Babylonians under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. Whereas the critical view has these two separated and represent the second and third empires of the statue, which you can see why Greece is the fourth empire in their view. They can't and won't allow for Rome or anyone else to be the fourth. So, two simple questions that need to be answered by the critical side is first, was Media ever an empire and did it follow the Babylonian Empire? And second, does the book of Daniel distinguish between Media and Persia, or does it speak of them as unified? Those two questions are going to be constantly addressed as we move forward in the book, but the first one is going to be the one that we're going to hammer on today. This involves us getting into the specifics of Daniel's interpretation to Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2, and also what the historical record tells us. We know from Daniel 2:32 that our statue is described from top to bottom as gold, silver, brass, iron, and iron with clay in the feet. The one agreement that critics share with traditionalists is that the head of gold is Babylon because Daniel declared this to Nebuchadnezzar. The Babylonian Empire ruled from 605 to 539 BC. So, the next empire should be the ones who conquered Babylon. In verse 39 it says that after thee, Babylon that is, shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Now the critical view says that the four empires are Babylon, second Media, third Persia, and the fourth is Greece. So, Media has to be the kingdom that their anonymous author or authors was referring to. Simple historical question. True or false? The Median Empire came after Babylon in 539 BC. The answer is false. History quite explicitly says that Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon in 539, and that 11 years before this, while the Babylonian Empire was still strong, that the Battle of Media took place between the Persians and the Medes. This battle ultimately forged the two nations together as one solid Medo-Persian empire. Now that might sound like I just jumped to the conclusion on this debate, but I'm not the one who's fighting against history on this. Critics have a giant problem because Cyrus was a Persian who led the conquering of Babylon in 539. you can see that the critical view is wedging in media between the Babylonian and Persian empires historically. But sorry, there is no gap to shove media into. Another detail in verse 39 is also key to this debate. It says that the third kingdom of brass shall rule over all the earth. This is huge because according to the critical view, they would have to say that the Persian Empire ruled over all the earth. Another simple historical question to ask of this is, did Persia rule over all the earth? But it also has a sub-question of, did Persia ever rule over Greece for that matter? You see, these are not hard questions to ask or to be answered. These are simple historical ones that anyone can look up. You don't need to be a university historian to be able to answer these. So, looking at the Persian record, you see a list of major battles that they had in the Near East and with Greece. They were victorious in the first 5 battles. On the map, you can see the territories that they conquered and controlled over the course of about 50 years. So, at its height, the Persian Empire was quite large, but did it ever rule over all the earth? Well, they tried to expand further west, but in what is now called the Greco-Persian Wars, you see that they were only successful at the Battle of Thermopylae. We kind of better understand this as the Battle of 300 with Gerard Butler leading the most chiseled men in history against the Persians. So, the critical view now has 2 strikes against it. Media didn't come after Babylon, and Persia never ruled over all the earth because they never conquered the Greeks. Think of this from the critical view for a moment. They are insistent that the anonymous author or authors wrote the book about 170 years after Alexander conquered the Persians. If the author meant for the Third Empire brass to be Persia, why would they say that Persia would rule over all the earth? They would have known that this never took place, so it really doesn't make sense for them to put in a self-defeating statement like this in the book. So you can see how the critical view doesn't hold up when you get into the minutiae of what their view really all entails. So we have them in an O2 count, so let's strike them out on their Fourth Empire view. Verses 40 and 41 say that the fourth kingdom shall be divided. So, according to the critical view, the Greek Empire had to be divided. Was the Greek Empire ever divided? Well, we know that prior to Alexander's death, that he ruled over everything from Greece to parts of India. It was the largest conquest known to man at that time. He was the first to control parts of India, as nobody prior to him, including the Persians, ever went that far into the east. And after Alexander's death, the Greek Empire did split up territorial rule to its 4 main generals because there was no successor ready to take over in Alexander's stead. So, should we call this a division of the empire, or that they simply split up the rule of it? Because if you were to contrast them with the Roman Empire, you would see that there was a clear division in the empire between the east and the west, as we discussed in our Chapter 2 study. Well, Brett, it seems like Greece was divided and kind of satisfies this requirement. Well, no they don't. And the reason why is because what body parts were made up of iron? The legs. Specifically, the 2 legs. The Greek diadochi was split up into how many parts? 4. So again, if the 2nd BC authors wanted the Fourth Empire to be Greece, then why are they really screwing up this comparison of the statue with recent history of their own time? Going back to our empire map, we see how the critical view strikes out when all we needed to do was ask basic historical questions. What about the biblical or traditional view? Does their 4 empires coincide with the historical record? Yes. A unified Medo-Persian empire did come after the Babylonian Empire in 539 BC under Cyrus the Great. Greece did rule over the whole earth under Alexander the Great, and Rome was divided and best represents the 2 iron legs of the statue. So, the biblical view holds up historically, while the critical view fails in all regards. Reminder to hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, and leave a comment. And don't forget to visit us at justscripture.org. In the meantime, stay salty.